Good day and welcome to today's Conversation podcast. I'm so privileged. I'm hosting a very distinguished woman in our country. She was Zambia's first professor. She's a scientist, a microbiologist, and many people will remember in the last elections that she was a running mate to President Edgar Lungu under the Patriotic Front. Honorable Nkandu, welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you so much. As you were saying, you are privileged. I was also thinking I'm also privileged to have this opportunity to be one of your guests on this very, very important program, I think, which is bringing a lot of interesting conversations to the rest of us in the country.
We want to deepen the depth of our discussions. We want to have meaningful conversations. And for you people that shape opinions in this country, we want the audience to understand who you are. Sometimes they just see your statements and they never understand who Nkandu is. You have accomplished so much in your life. You've been minister under various governments. You, like I said, you were the running mate to President Edgar Lungu. We'll discuss that later. Who is Nkandu?
Yeah, thank you so much, Emmanuel. Nkandu is just a very humble woman from both Northern Province and Muchinga Province. At one time, it was one province. My father, as history is that he's from the lineage of Chief Unkula. And as you know, Chief Unkula is one of those that is privileged one time to be H.T. Mukulu.
Yeah.
So our great-grandparents were from a lineage that, from being a Chief Unkula, they became Chief Chitimukulu. So my father's family is found both in Malole, Kasama, and Chensali, and Impeka. Because to become Nkula, you have to start as Chief Chikwanda.
Yes.
Then you get transferred to become Chief Unkula. Then you are waited to become Chitimukulu. But when my grandfather grew up, he came back to Chensali and married the daughter to Chief Unkweto. Yeah. So my grandmother comes from the chiefdom of Unkweto in a village called Milomfi. And then when my dad grew up and got married, he decided to marry the daughter of Chief Chibesakunda. So my mother, if you like, is the daughter to Chief Chibesakunda. And this is why at one point our brother, the fifth born, became Chief Chibesakunda. He's now late.
So may he so rest in eternal peace. He's among those, chiefs that we lost to COVID, I think.
No. In fact, he died. It says that he died during COVID.
Oh, I see.
And people attributed his death to COVID. If he had died from COVID, they would have not allowed him to be kept in state for a year. Under the traditional practices, they keep them for a year, they embalm them traditionally, and then they come and bury them a year later. And what is so sad is that it's so nice to be in the royal family, but when you have a death, it's the most painful thing.
Yeah.
We've never seen our brother from the time he died. He was taken over by his traditionalists called the Chikopes in the Mutambe chiefdom. And then after 1 year, all we were doing is provide them with food and everything as they looked after our brother. Then another group of people, because when you're born in those families.
Yeah.
So the Chikopes, their role is to look after the chief when the chief dies. Then when they die, at the time of burial, then a Pumomwe family takes over. Then they go to bury.
Who then conduct the burial ceremony.
Yes, and then he's carried by another group which carries the chief, even during when they're alive, if there's a traditional ceremony, they take them and so on. So even if we went to the burial, we were just by the palace. The only way we knew our brother was being taken to rest is because they beat up the drums. And when they came back, the Pumomwefu and Chikope teams and all that, they came, with dancing in song and so on. Then we knew they were back. So if you like, we've never had a closure to that death. So in a nutshell, my mother was the daughter to Chief Chibesakunda. But then the other thing about my two parents, they were both teachers.
Okay.
So my father taught and my mother in Chinsali at a school called Mubanga Basic School. And then, we were being born girls. Our firstborn is a girl, is a woman now, myself and so on. So obviously, in the olden days, people didn't like it when somebody was having daughters.
Yeah.
So because everybody started saying, oh, this woman is just having daughters, blah, blah, blah. So what my daddy decided, which he really, when you talk about gender now, I think that my father was very gender sensitive. We decided to move from Chinsali and go and work in Chivesakunda, Mutambe, our chiefdom is called. So they started teaching at a school called Chinkumba. This is now Nkandu district.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was part of Chivesakunda. And then, sometime after so many years, my father was promoted and brought to Munali Secondary School. So they moved to Munali Secondary School. So that was our first experience. Then I was a little girl anyway. I didn't even know we were being moved from Mutambe to Chinsali. But anyway, as we grew up to Munali Secondary School, of course, as we grew up and started school, we realized we're now in the city of Lusaka. So even in terms of starting my primary education, I started at a school just close to Munali Secondary School. It's called Tunduya. That's where I started my first year in primary school. So, and then my father, being a teacher, was transferred from school to school. He taught at Bema Road Basic School, taught in Chilanga, taught in what is now called Hillside School, but at that time it was called Sengalumbwe. He taught at another school, which is also in Matero. And then his last school, by then he had even been promoted, he was headmaster in all these schools. He retired from Emmanuel, what is now called Emmanuel Basic School. By that time it was a primary school. And again, as we were moving all this, of course, I wrote what is now called grade 7. And I went to Roma Secondary School for my secondary school. Yeah. And ended up at what then was called the Dominican Convent, which is now called St. Mary's School. And from there, I got a scholarship to go to Russia. And yeah, so I went to Russia, and my first stint was arriving in a country where I didn't speak any language called Russian. Yeah. And of course,
they don't speak English.
They don't speak English.
Yeah.
And when you try and buy something, because for some reason, our embassy did not meet us, and they lost us. So now, the very interesting story about my trip to Russia is that one, I had 2 scholarships, one to go to Canada, one to go to Russia. But you know what? We had been reading about socialism, how everybody's equal, everything is free. I chose to go to Russia. Now, as I was packing my suitcase, my aunt, Mrs. Chivesakunda Emma, the wife to the late Mwelwa Chivesakunda, was once clerk of National Assembly. Clerk
of the National Assembly, yes.
Packed me a bottle of Mazoya and some biscuits. And I was like, Mayo, how can you pack me? Don't you know I'm going to Europe? Then my aunt said, Nkandu, so she sneaked these things in. Didn't they save us?
Wow.
There were 5 of us. 2 gentlemen. No, we're 7 of us. 3 women and 4 gentlemen. So we learned, of course, we recognized each other because we were going for orientation at the same time. And then we were taken to this hostel. In Russian, they call it общежитие. And we slept hungry. The following day, we went with our dollars to try and buy food. And you know, when we pick what we want to buy, then we present them with dollars. Then they will say, "Nyet nyet, dollar, nyet nyet," and we didn't even know what nyet nyet was. That just means no dollar we can't take.
Yes, yes.
So then they would say rublia. So we didn't even know the Russian money was called rublia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, we came back to the hostel. Then I said to them, I said, Auntie packed me some biscuits at Mazoe. That's what saved us for 2 days. We kept eating those biscuits at Mazoe. And then one day when we are really trying hard, even thinking maybe they don't understand what we want, we're going, kokoliko, meaning, chicken. They just say, nyet dollar, ruplia. Then Professor Yamba, who is at University of Zambia, the expert in climate change issues, then they were also looking for us. So then he hears us speaking Bemba.
He was a student as
He
well?
was a student there. He was doing mechanical engineering. So he's the one who discovered us, and then we're taken to the embassy, and then they processed our distribution, because we had those that wanted to study in the line of health. The three of us ladies were in the line of health. Then we had some of our gentlemen who wanted to do engineering. So, and then we had one of the gentlemen, or two, also wanted to do health. So they distributed us. The three of us girls were taken to Rostov Medical Institute. This is in a town called Rostov-on-Don. And then the gentlemen, two were sent to, one was sent to Kiev, and the other one was sent to a place called Lvov. And then those who were doing engineering were left in Moscow. Two were doing geology, one was doing engineering. They remained in Moscow, and we had this long journey, I think, of 3 days to get to Rostov-on-Don.
By train?
By train. So we arrived there, we were taken in, and then they told us we have to have a crash program and learn Russian in 3 months. And during that period, you're not only learning Russian, you're also learning science. So chemistry, physics, biology, you are learning it in Russian.
Wow.
So, yeah. So anyway, they also took us to the museum to treat us to being used to seeing dead bodies. So the museum has from a fetus, which is a few weeks old, to an old person who was about 87 years.
Did you know you were going to pursue science? Did you know you're going to be a microbiologist?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
Yes. But one of the things I didn't tell you is that, but when I was in secondary school, Judge Lombeshwe Sakunda, the former acting Chief Justice, had just made a landmark where she became the first woman lawyer.
Yeah.
And after school, or during holidays, I would go to watch her prosecuting in court. Immediately as she came home, I also put on her gowns. And at that time,
to be a lawyer.
At that time, I thought I would be the most brilliant lawyer this country would have. And I really wanted to be a lawyer. But unfortunately, when my results came out, they were more skewed to science than to law. Then Professor Goma told me, when he assessed my results, says, no, you are not a lawyer, you are a scientist.
You've got a brain for science.
Yeah, so as I went, I actually had a scholarship to go and pursue health. So anyway, what is also interesting, which I need to share then, is that because we didn't know Russian, so at the end of every class, they used to give us things to recite, to come and talk back the following day to see whether we are doing well in spoken Russian. So one of the times we were given a statement to make, which was Minyaza Vuti Nkandu.
Minyaza Vuti Nkandu.
My name is Nkandu. Ya bednaya, I'm poor. Savieska msayuze, nye pamagaet. The Soviet Union is helping me. So we would be on the bus, making sure that we pronounce it properly the next day. Then you go, Nyaza Vuti Nkandu. Yeah, biednaya. When I came, I knew the meaning. I was upset.
Furious. Why am I declaring poverty?
Exactly. Yeah. So we had some very, very interesting time. And we were also told in the beginning that if you study hard, and at every exam you get 5. 5 is excellent. 1 is fail. 3 is pass. 4 is good. You then get what is called Leninsky Atlichnik, a Lenin excellent student. Then you can get yourselves into the top grade universities.
Okay.
So
okay.
our aim, with a colleague of mine, may her soul rest in peace, Dr. Betty Mnalula, we started working towards getting into Moscow State University, because that's the most prestigious university in Russia. And in fact, if you tell anybody that, I know Professor Luo, she went to Moscow State, most likely the Russian will say, no.
It's not possible.
It's not possible. But we worked so hard, and after finishing our year, it's called preparatory year, where you learn sciences and Russians. Then the second year is when you start.
Then you pick a university to go to.
Yes. So we were admitted into Moscow State University. So we started there. When we started specializing, I specialized as a microbiologist, and Dr. Betty Mnalula specialized as a physiologist. The way the structure of education in Russia, because there are too many doctors, too many specialists, you can actually specialize straight as a pediatrician, you can specialize straight as an obstetrician, you can specialize straight as a microbiologist or a physiologist, so I chose to become a microbiologist. So after so many years of studies in Russia and specializing, I came back to Zambia. And I was actually admitted at the School of Medicine of the University of Zambia. And then I started working under a Dr. Powell. Dr. Powell is somebody who was interested in making a vaccine against sleeping sickness. So I started working with him, and I got interested into a super specialty of microbiology. It's called immunology.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So that, because when you talk about vaccines, and this is why I was all over the place in HIV, because that's an immunological subject.
Okay.
I then got interested in immunology, and I competed for a scholarship with Byte Trust, and I left for the UK to study
immunology. Specializing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, during that time, I was also in Zambia. I met my husband, who I got married to a week before I left for England. He was also going to England to study urology. So we had this very fantastic wedding. Yeah, and it was really one of those times. So if you see now people feeding people cakes at a wedding, that was started from my wedding. And we, dancing during a ceremony, a wedding ceremony, and so on. So
you were both working at the time?
Yeah, we were both working at UTH. He was working as a surgeon at UTH, and he wanted to specialize now as a neurosurgeon. And I wanted to go and specialize once again, because I'm already a specialist microbiologist, as an immunologist this time.
Yeah.
So I was with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, pursuing my PhD.
Yeah.
Now, because I knew when I qualify, I'll still come back to teach. Immunology is a very hard subject. In fact, most doctors, when they fell in the subject called microbiology and immunology. So I knew that it would be very difficult for me to teach, because normally for PhD, you are doing a research.
Yeah.
So I enrolled for a part-time course at Brunel University to do immunology, but taught immunology.
Okay. So you can then come and teach it properly.
Yes. So if you like, when I got my PhD in March 1984, I'd also the previous year gotten my master's in immunology. So I came back to Zambia with both another master's immunology and a PhD immunology. Yeah. And I spent some time at the University College Hospital to just practice, because at the time I was doing my PhD, I chose to specialize in sickle cell anemia, because I was trying to explain why when a person who has sickle cell anemia gets a pneumococcal infection or a salmonella infection, they get complications.
Yeah.
For salmonella, they get what is called salmonella osteomyelitis. And for pneumococcal, they die within 72 hours.
What are those diseases in English?
In English, the simple thing about osteomyelitis is when you see the joints of your joints in the legs. Sometimes people they get bent. They have difficulties in walking. Sometimes it's called arthritis, but there is a distinction between actually osteomyelitis and arthritis to some extent if you have to explain them scientifically. But I think the nearest word that I know a lot of people know, I would use the word arthritis, but scientifically there is quite a distinction. Yeah. And then, I then did some with the...
Just on sickle cell, Professor, I had no idea that the prevalence of sickle cell is the highest actually in Northern Province.
Yes.
And I don't know why we haven't attended to that disease. I know you are born with it because...
It's genetic.
Because it's genetic. I don't know why we haven't invested. I think it's one of those, maybe we haven't paid attention to diseases like sickle cell.
Actually, if we had to go into the diseases that we have not paid attention to, there are so many. One of the explanations for which I have no scientific base, but just sitting with my grandmother, she used to tell me about the fact that when you look at our Great Trek, while there's the Great Trek from Congo, there was also a trek
of diseases.
People, the movements of people.
Oh, yeah.
We have a lot of people in Northern Province, Luapula, and part of Eastern Province, and Northwestern and Copperbelt, and Central Province, the Bemba-speaking type Central Province. It said that the movements were from Congo. But there is also a movement that came from the north. Yeah. And it's believed that these were people who some of them had Arabic origin, came through Sudan, Ethiopia, and so on. Now, there is a sister disease that is found in the Arabic countries called thalassemia major. It also presents itself very similar to sickle cell.
Okay.
So maybe if we had to do some studies, we may trace them to just some mixed bloods of people, the intermarriages and so on, as people were trekking, they were having children and so on. But your question is so important that it's very important as we do our studies that we start looking at sickle cell. And there's now been a lot of breakthrough even in terms of management of sickle cell anemia. And maybe very soon it will be history because people will be managed properly. But I think it is important always, as a scientist, always to study and have evidence.
Those neglected diseases like sickle cell. And, if you see the pain and when they have those medical crises,
the crisis,
it's so moving, it's so emotional, the pain they go through. And usually then they die quite early. They never make it beyond 30 to 50.
Yes.
So you scientists need to pay attention to it.
Yeah, in fact, I will explain how I abandoned this particular work as I talk more a little bit about what I've done. So, if I had remained there, maybe I would have been answering the questions. But my husband was training in Germany. And what I didn't like was that, because when I started...
For the record, this is Dr. Mwamba.
Dr. Mwamba, yeah. So
the famous urologist for... These people were so famous in their own right. If you didn't connect the two names, you would not know that they were husband and wife.
Yeah. So now, what I didn't like after I finished my studies, or even during because I published quite a lot even as a student, and I used to speak at conferences presenting my work. So what I didn't like was, every time I stood to speak and present my work, when you have a break, our supervisors, our colleagues would come and say, oh, that was fantastic, darling. But did you do it yourself? Meaning,
A woman can do it.
Yeah, and a black person for that matter. So I told my husband, I said, look, I need my own identity. I'm going home. And he didn't like the idea of coming back to Zambia. If given a chance, Dr. Mwamba wanted us to settle in Germany. But I was very adamant about coming back home because I like to be myself, and I like people to appreciate what I'm worthy. And I just couldn't stand this thing of being asked, did you do it yourself? Like you're a second-class citizen.
Yeah.
So I came back. 2 years later, Dr. Mwamba joined me. Now, when I came back, the Department of Pathology and Microbiology had only 4 doctors, 2 in pathology, Professor Nkandu, may he so rest in peace, and Dr. Patel. And then in microbiology, there was Dr. Pereira. Immunology, there was a Professor Piasso. So the day I reported, it was very funny. I got to the UTH and they told me, there's a viva. They were examining medical students. And then I said, okay, let me go there. So I drove to Ridgeway campus. And there's a whole lot of students waiting to be examined.
Yeah.
So a message went in to Professor Piasso and said, there is a Dr. Luo to see you outside. She says, look, I don't even have time. No, they said, there's somebody to see you outside.
Yeah.
She says, I don't have time. Look at the viva, So I was told this, but I insisted. I said, no, tell her it's Dr. Luo. And she knew I was reporting. Oh, you should have seen her. She came out with her, says, you have saved my day. Because they knew that I'll be performing both duties as a microbiologist and also as an immunologist. Yeah, because I have a double major. Yeah, so you have to start work right now. Come in and start examining.
Wow.
I said, look, I've only been examined. I've never examined anybody. So anyway, I went in, I sat in, at least I had an idea of how the vivas were done. So the following day I joined them. And then I reported to UTH, Department of Pathology and Microbiology, and I was given an office, and that's how I started work. So there was never a moment when I came back and I said,
and rested. You came dove straight into work.
Started working. Yeah.
You were Zambia's first professor. And by the the Sesafly vaccine, did you succeed?
We didn't. And they are still working on it. They're still working on it, yeah.
So I was saying you were Zambia's first woman professor. Just speak to that. How did the fraternity recognize you? How did you achieve that?
Yeah. In fact, this is a very important question because now anybody is becoming a professor, which is very sad here in Zambia. But as I was telling you, when I came back from training, started working for UTH, Professor Chintu and Professor Ann Bailey and Dr. Hira, they had a patient who had been giving them a lot of problems. They treat them for this, they come back with tuberculosis, they treat them for tuberculosis, they come back with a skin problem. There was a cancer those days that was known as Kaposi sarcoma, which was very common. So Professor Chintu calls me to a meeting with these 2 professors and Dr. Hira. Dr. Hira was a skin specialist. Professor Ann Bailey was very famous in Zambia, was a surgeon. And Professor Chintu was both a pediatrician and also an oncologist, specialist in cancer, but in blood cancers. So then he says to me, well, we now have a young immunologist here. We have this patient, and then they described what the patient had been presenting with. Tell us what is, because we think this patient has an immunological disorder. Tell us what is the problem.
Yeah.
So I said, no problem. And then I go to my office and say, my God, this is my first challenge.
Yes. What an assignment.
Suppose it doesn't work. So then we collected the bloods from the patient. We set up the system and did all sorts of investigation on the patient. Then I remember that when I was training, in the hospitals where I was training, there was this new disease that had come. And I had worked with a doctor called Dr. Richard Taylor. So I picked up the phone and called him. I said, Dr. Richard Taylor, you know, the symptoms you used to describe of some people who were dying, and there was a particular person who will remain nameless who had come because he was high profile and died from diarrhea. So I think the patient I'm dealing with
is also exhibiting similar symptoms.
Yeah, and he's even got this captious sarcoma. So he asked me to send the blood. So I put the bloods in liquid nitrogen and shipped them to UK. We didn't have the technology we have now. We only had Zambia Airways.
Yeah.
But they arrived. And alas, it was confirmed that this was the first case of HIV/AIDS in Zambia.
You discovered the first case of HIV/AIDS in Zambia?
Four of us, myself, Professor Chintu, Professor Ann Bailey, and Dr. Hira.
Wow.
We were the people who described the first case of HIV in Zambia. And the first patient remained anonymous? Yes, we remained anonymous. Although he is late, but you don't discuss patients. So we then informed Professor Angelesan was then, the PS. We informed him, and there was, of course, a lot of hype. We were called. And alarm, yeah. Yes, and the committee was set up. To understand. They called it the epidemiology committee, so that we start even mapping. So people like... this was when we discovered the first case of... 1985. 1985. Yes. So the committee comprised a lot of people that are still living in Zambia, Dr. George Tembo, an epidemiologist, Katele Kalumba, behavioral scientist and social scientist. We had Dr. Ben Chirwa, health promotion expert, and Benin Koani, an epidemiologist, Dr. Babu, may he so rest in peace, an epidemiologist, and so on. So what were your terms of reference? Our terms of reference now was to start mapping this infection, but so that we know how widespread it is, in what sort of population do we see it. This is why the epidemiologists were very, very critical in this whole thing. Those of us who were in the lab to screen as many patients as possible. Now, at that time, I was being sent to study in Switzerland. At a university called Lausanne. And I did my practicals at the Continental Hospital, the WHO training center. So off I went. Then I called Dr. Richard Tedder. I said, Dr. Richard Tedder, I think that there's something we are not doing right. Because I think most of the people we are finding with HIV are those that are associated with blood transfusion. And I said, the department I'm involved with has a blood bank. Now, from my training, a blood transfusion is a treatment, is therapeutic. And diagnosing of disease, laboratory tests are diagnostic. So the two don't marry. So he says, you're right, that's why here in England we have blood transfusion services separate from laboratory services. So he came to Geneva to join me. We drafted a proposal. By then, they had just set up the global program on AIDS. I don't remember what we wrote, but whatever we wrote was very attractive. And it attracted $700,000. And as I was finishing my training in 1986, I was landing in Zambia with $700,000. This was to set up the blood screening in Zambia, so that every person who is transfused with blood, that blood is tested. It's free of HIV, free of syphilis, and free of malaria. Did you suspect that the first patient that you had found HIV with was, it could have come from blood transfusion, or it's a phenomenon you saw later in other patients? Well, the first patient, I think, may have got it sexually because they were mobile. They were all over the world. And they were traveling internationally. Yes. But as somebody in pathology and microbiology, and all the time we are asked to provide blood to patients, I saw it as an important component for us to do. And the way we were collecting blood, we were going in the prisons And we're going into...
How prevalent was the HIV/AIDS at the time?
At that time, I cannot tell you how prevalent, but the studies we put through, by 1989, 25% of the population was HIV positive.
It had spread so quickly.
Yes.
In such a short time.
Because we're having two high transmission points, sex and blood.
Blood transfusion.
Yeah. So the way I set up this program with Professor Richard Taylor and Dr. Dallas from Tanzania was to make sure that we spread the testing across Zambia, and we set up 33 blood screening centers all over Zambia. So I traveled extensively, training laboratory staff, training data entry staff. That's how we came up with the data that we had about 25% of the people infected. And, I was busy, and I abandoned the sickle cell anemia.
Okay,
program.
That's how it suffered.
So now I was more an HIV
because it was a new disease requiring new expertise.
So all these things I'm doing, you asked me the question, how did I become a professor?
Yeah.
You are documenting, they are part of your successes to become a professor. And then I went to the EU, and I said, it's not enough for us to set up just the 3 blood screening centers. I need a total separation of blood from laboratory services. And they gave me $4.5 million for this to happen. So if you travel around Zambia in all the provinces, starting from Lusaka, you find buildings that look exactly the same in Livingstone, in Mongu, in Kitwe, in Kasama, in Chipata. We constructed blood transfusion services, and we trained staff all over the country to go and run those services. And I appointed Dr. Gabriel Muyinda as the director for blood transfusion services, and Dr. Mlenga as the deputy director. And these two, and a lot of us started running with this program. But I wasn't still satisfied.
Yeah.
I still said we now need to upgrade the lab services. But all this is going on my CV. So then I went to the Japanese and negotiated for a 5-year renewable program now to upgrade our laboratory services. Because, for example, we didn't have a TB lab. We had to go to near the airport to the National Council for Scientific Research, set up something for us to be testing blood, testing sputum for tuberculosis. So we now got this money to train staff in Japan, exchange program of staff, including myself. I would go to Japan to the Virus Institute and even give some lectures there. And then the Japanese would come to Zambia. We had a lot of people to come and work with us at the lab, and we started constructing. So if you look at most of the laboratory facilities that are at UTH, they were constructed under this program.
That program with Japan.
So we did an immunology lab, we did a virology lab, we did a TB lab, we did an incinerator, we extended the mortuary. That's why now you have to go down around there. Before you went between the labs and police to go downstairs, but now you've got that exit. So we did a lot of work. And also, we constructed, when you go to pediatrics now, in the last so many years, there's a brown building where children are admitted.
Yes.
And a ward and a lecture. Yes, that was part of the project. All that is going on my CV. Yeah, so, and then I'm also publishing. Whatever I'm doing, the studies, whatever, I'm publishing with some of my colleagues. I published quite a bit with Professor Chintu, published with Professor Zumla, published with...
To our viewers, when you say you've published, what does that mean?
You are writing articles. When you start, you do research and you have a finding. For example, a lot of patients...
A breakthrough finding.
Yes. For example, a lot of people who had diarrhea, we were trying to find out what are the causes of this diarrhea.
Yeah.
So through our work, were able to establish that a lot of people were suffering from this diarrhea, from a bacteria that ordinarily, when it gives you diarrhea, it's self-limiting. It's called Cryptosporidium.
So why was it adverse?
Because your immune system is down.
Oh, you now related it to HIV again.
And it was
and people
common.
are now dying of diarrhea because of lack of immunity.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we also found that some of it was allergies. Because they would get a lot of IgE reactions, and then they would have this diarrhea for a long time. And many other things that we discovered.
Which year were you now finally conferred this professorship? Because it made national news.
Well, I think it was 1995. 1995.
At the peak of that career, at the peak of your medical career, you are recognized across the world, like you say, you are publishing in medical journals across the world. You chose to go into politics. Because then I think we see you as a candidate for Mandevo and the MMD. Just speak to that.
Yeah, what then happened is in 1991, when there was the change from the UNIP government to the MMD, President Chiluba asked myself, Dr. Kawimbe, the late Bertram Membe, may his soul rest in peace, the late Caroline Kaunda, may his soul rest in peace, and the late Dr. Manda and myself to write the health chapter of the manifesto, and Dr. Katele Kanumba.
Okay.
So we did that contribution to the
Party manifesto of MMD in 1991.
So he knew us. So at the time they were picking candidates to run, we of course approached. And I said to him that I've always wanted to be a professor.
Yeah.
And it's just about to happen. Because by then I had a very rich CV, published, spoken at international conferences all over the world, all the things that make up someone to become a professor. And I said no. So
you missed the train in 1991
Yes.
because you want to achieve first professorship.
Yes.
Okay.
So now, because I was all over my work, one day I'm actually running a workshop. I get a phone call. This is now about 1994. That the president would like to see you at State House. And I said, yeah, I don't know what I've done now. So I went to State House, obviously very uncomfortable. And I find Mr. President Chiluba. He says, oh, Nkandu, I called you here, you have a cup of tea with me. So we sat, and I started, very nervous, of course, drinking my tea. Then he says, oh, relax. I've got very good news for you. I said, good news. I said, so for me, I was thinking maybe I'm being invited to something.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was used to. Then he says, I want to appoint you in my government. I looked at him. I said, no, Mr. President, I can't work in your government. I said, my papers have just been sent. And that's what I was saying. These days, anybody is becoming a professor.
Yeah.
The real way in which you become a professor, when they assess your papers locally, they're supposed to establish a prima facie case that you qualify to be a professor. But your publications must be sent to at least 3 universities, top-class universities, for assessment by somebody in your profession. So my papers were sent to Hoku University in Japan, to University of Stockholm in Stockholm, and you have to have one African university, and it was sent to University of Yaoundé.
Okay.
And
This was around your work around HIV/AIDS.
HIV, sickle cell anemia, everything I done.
Oh, okay.
How much money I brought into the country, and all these projects. But they, apart from what I've described, I also brought in money If you've heard of the Zambia project, which is a big project now, looking at tuberculosis and HIV, that was my baby. And then I'd also gone back to school. I'd gone back to the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine to take, apart from what I got in Switzerland, I went now to do epidemiology and medical statistics. Apart from my immunology, I'd gone back. And then I'd also been sent to Uniformed Service University in Bethesda to go and learn flow cytometry.
What is that?
Where you study the cells of the immune system. And when you are saying T cells, people now say, oh, I think I'm doing well because my cell count is so much. That is part of that study. When you work on a machine, which now helps you to start separating the B cells from the T cells and the T cell subsets and all sorts of things. Then I'd been sent back to St. Mary's Hospital in UK to study the HIV medicine and all sorts of things. So all these were going on my CV. So I knew I'm there. I'll be there any minute. So I said, then the president said to me, you are very funny. When your friends come here, I offer them a job, they jump. I said, well, unfortunately, that is not the line that I have always wanted
you
to
turned down the job.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he says, okay, it's okay. Now, I need to tell you the story about how I became a professor. Professor Mkelabai had actually recommended me very early on because of the publishing, the work I was doing, the recognition I was getting all over the world. You wouldn't go anywhere without hearing Dr. Nkandu. So he said, I think you should give an accelerated promotion. But when Professor Makulu, because he then joined UNICEF, when Professor Makulu became dean, he didn't like the fact that I wear short dresses.
So the short dresses have been from a long time ago.
From the time I was a student. So he didn't even want anything to do with, so he was not interested in my capacity intellectually, but he was very upset that I wear short dresses. So I said, fine, this is my signature. And myself, I don't like to do things because people want you to do them. If I believe in something, I want to do with it. And I had, as a side thing, you have hobbies. And my mother was a domestic teacher, then eventually she did designing. She always taught us that if you are short, you can't wear a midi. You either wear a knee length or you wear full length. And I also realized that when I'm dressed like that, people will say, oh, you're looking nice. Or if I'm full, they'll say, oh, you're looking elegant. So I said, I'm not going to do what. And so even people who worked with me at UTH know me for that. My students know me for that.
So just say that again. When you are short, to the ladies, they learn something.
You wear knee length. Because if you wear a midi, you don't look elegant. It sort of makes you even shorter. And you look clumsy. If not, you wear full length. If you're the type that's not comfortable with short dresses, wear full length. Then you look elegant. And you talk to anybody who is a designer or a fashionist, they'll tell you that.
It's a basic principle.
So when you dress up, you must dress up to look good. You should not dress up because you're stepping out of your house. You should look good, feel good about yourself. That's me. I love myself and I feel good about myself. So
wonderful.
Anyway, so Makulu came and shelved away. May he so rest in peace my application. Then when Professor Chintu came, this although slow, this thing was resurrected. Now the day they said I should take my CVs, which because they were sending them out, they established a prima facie case. Professor Chintu decided to tell me about 16 hours. And I have a 40-page CV and I need to put in 40 copies. So we didn't sleep that night. I got all my data staff, everybody. When the thing gets hot, the photocopier. We get it by 9 o'clock. I was submitting my 40-page CV to the academic registrar. So that's how it was sent out. So I obviously knew that they will obviously give me my professor. So I was not going to spoil it for anything. So now, the very juicy story is when I was given professorship, and I used to also be the chair for infection control. And that day we had a particular case in D block of somebody who had been wanting to have a baby. So they had this special baby, but they mismanaged the baby in D block. And the baby got infected with Pseudomonas. This is a bacteria that is very resistant to antibiotics. And usually it's acquired in the hospital. They are called nosocomial infections or hospital-acquired infections. So I was sorting out
when
that
the
problem.
environment is not clean. Yeah.
Then, so Professor Chintu was told, you go and communicate to Professor Luo, to Dr. Luo, because we've mistreated her. Let her be told it today. So the first person Professor Chintu met was me at D block, because he had an office in D block. Professor, how are you? Hello, what are you doing here? I said, we have because he was a pediatrician. I said, there's a very special case here, and I think we are going to get into trouble because, this was a special baby, blah, blah. So as chair of infection control and my infection control nurse, we are here to sort this out. We finished, sorted out this problem. I left. Professor Chintu didn't mention a word. So then I get home, and by then we were running the Tacenta program, and I was chair. The secretary was a Merab Kremire. May her soul rest in peace. So the husband says, "Have you spoken to Dr. Luo today?" So she says, "No." He says, "You mean she hasn't called you? Because the news I have, she should have called you by now." So she says, "No." Says, "You call her." So Merab calls me. "Nkandu, how are you?" I said, "I'm good." And the same usual. He says, "You mean she's not excited?" He says, "No." He says, "No. Go and buy champagne. When you bought champagne, come back, then I'll tell you why I've asked you to be." So Merab went and bought champagne. Then the husband says, "Do you know your friend has made history?" So he says, "Why?" He says, "She's been I've conferred professorship. Do you know she's the first woman professor
in Zambia?"
So Merab then calls me. "Nkandu, come home." I said, "Merab, I'm tired." He says, "No, come." So I went. And immediately I arrived, they popped the champagne. I says, "Nkandu, congratulations." I just sat down and started crying. I was so emotional about it. And then, so we drank champagne. Then I remembered that I have a family. So I said, "Merab, let's just drink one glass. Give me the rest of the champagne." So I carried the champagne. And then Professor Kremire says, "This is a secret." I said, "Yeah, I know it's a secret." So got into my car, drove to Uncle Ken's place, my uncle Chivesakunda in Roma. And this is now about 20 hours. So I hoot. I just, uncle comes, I said, "Yeah, go inside, I've got a secret." So we went inside, and I said, "Where are the glasses of champagne?" So poured champagne. I said, "Yeah, ma, our family has made history. Do you know that I'm the first woman professor?" So now we started celebrating. With my uncle, my aunt, everybody, the children who were there. Then she said to me, "No, we can't end here. We must go to Makeni." So we drove to Makeni now, to Uncle Mwera Chivesakunda's home. And when we arrived, says, "Finish, 22 hours, 23 hours."
People finish family. I was
says, "Just go inside, we have a secret." So Uncle goes inside with Auntie, says, "Do you have champagne?" Because Uncle always had champagnes, because we didn't have a champagne now. So he goes and brings champagne. I said, "We need to toast. Do you know our family has made history?" So we started celebrating. And then, of course, we came home. So the following day, I said to myself, about 9 o'clock, Professor Suela calls me and says, "Dr. Luo, how are you?" I said, "I'm good." He says, "Oh, have you heard anything from your dean?" I said, "No." He says, "We instructed him to inform you that you have made history. You are the first woman professor in Zambia." I said, "No, but I even met him. We had a case in D block. Maybe that's what
he didn't even mention."
So then he says, "Well, the letter is on the way. You are now change your title. You are no longer Dr. Luo. You are now Professor Luo." So I just said, "Thank you very much." But meantime, I had been celebrating the whole night. So then I called my staff. I said, because we still hadn't had our Christmas party, I said, go and book for a Christmas party at Pamosi. Everybody, including the cleaners, are coming. Because before they used to have these parties where our general workers had their own.
Separate
and I said,
yeah.
we are all having it together. Then I sent them to go and buy a lot of presents. I wrapped the presents. Then we invited the then Deputy Minister of Education, may he so rest in peace, Honorable Mianda. And I invited the Dean, and I invited then Dr. Katema, was head of UTH. Yeah, because some of the money and things I was doing, they were coming through UTH, others through the Dean, who was my boss. So then we got there. Next door, the ZNBC were also doing their Christmas party. So after all the speeches, then I was to give a vote of thanks. So that's when I said, actually, you know, Dean, the Honorable Minister, and the head of UTH, the reason I hosted this party is because I want to say thank you to my staff. Because they've been very good. All the publications I've been doing, there are particular members of staff who have been doing the data entry. When I've been typing, my secretaries have been helping and all that. So I've got presents for them. So I started giving out presents to all the staff that were very critical to my work. And then I said, as the final word, the Department of Pathology and Microbiology has made history because you have produced the first woman professor. So Professor Chintu gets up, I'm the one who's supposed to. I said, Prof, please sit down. Sit down. You were told to tell me yesterday, but you chose not to tell me.
Yeah.
So for now,
I'll make the announcement.
I've informed, and I'm also informing the minister, and I'm informing the head of UTH, Dr. Katema. So they now, ZNBC had the celebration.
Yeah,
so Frank and Doreen Mkanzo come, what's going on here? So I said, you know, I've made history. I'm the first woman professor. And so they grabbed one of the champagnes and went to ZNBC.
Yeah,
Here's a news item that has just come. Professor Ruo becomes the first woman professor. And then so there was a lot of celebration. So Chiluba, President Chiluba saw that. So the very next day he called me. And he said,
congratulations.
Congratulations. Now that you're a professor, I would like to give you that appointment. I said, Mr. President, do you know what it means to be a professor? Maybe here in Zambia, people don't realize, but we who travel internationally, do you know that if I'm going to speak at an international conference, they say the next speaker is Dr. Luo. People wait for me to speak. When I speak well, that's when they clap. But if they say the next speaker is Professor Chintu, people even give standing ovations because they are recognizing you for who you are. So I said, look, I have to enjoy my title. So I just can't be appointed just yet. And
what job was he thinking at the time to give you? Did you have an idea?
He wanted to appoint me as one of the cabinet ministers. And,
he wanted to nominate you, then you come to cabinet.
Nominate me, and I go to cabinet. So I said, he wanted me to go and actually run Minister of Health. So I said, no, Mr. President, because he didn't want to be called Excellency. It was Mr. President.
Yes.
I said, Mr. President, I think I know what I want in life. And I also told him, I said, secondly, I don't want a nomination. Because when you fire me, then I would have lost everything. So allow me to be given a constituency. So just wait until 1996 so that you give me a constituency.
You can consider that.
And so
that's remarkable that you can turn down a ministerial job. Very few do that. Before we transition to your political life, which is mouthful, just speak to the program of Dacinta, because that's the first thing Zambians saw you with, that you were running with these former sex workers. And they had very telling effect. What drove you to work with sex workers and attempt to reform them? And then the horror stories would hear, and then now you tried to empower them. I think that was a remarkable program.
Yeah. I think I'll backtrack a little bit that as I was doing my HIV work, we also used to discuss a lot with the various women, especially in the conferences. What we discovered, whenever data was being presented, it had a female face. They said 25% of the population is infected, you'll find that maybe 20% they are women. And when you stratify for age, you'll find that most of them are young girls between the age 15 and 25. So we decided to set up a movement, which was huge, called the Society for Women and AIDS in Africa. And we traveled the whole African continent, 10 of us. Dr. Eka Williams, Nigerian, who was the first president of SWAS, and Dr. Fatia Mahmoud from Sudan, Dr. Deborah Zaudi, who was the first vice president from Ethiopia, myself as the first secretary general from Zambia, and Dr. Teresa Hocken from Angola, and so on. We traveled and mobilized the entire African continent and set up chapters in about 56 countries of Africa. And we set up country chapters. And I set up the Zambian chapter. It's called Society for Women and AIDS in Zambia. It's a SWAS, yeah. Now, it was from the work of SWAS and the other people who were also working with women's groups like Mrs. Mutukwa, who was working with WILDAF, the NGOCC, and Emerab Kiremire, who was working with the Finnish embassy. We then started sharing our experiences as I was doing SWAS work. What else was I seeing? And this whole story about our commercial sex workers was laid on the table. But wherever we went, they were telling us sex work is work. So we decided to bring the women to talk to us. And Mrs. Rantakari, who was the wife of the Swedish ambassador, and Mrs. Eisenberg, the husband was with ILO. They started hosting us. And we were having women come to speak one by one and telling us what they would like us to do. And they told us categorically that what we go through, nobody can actually say sex work is work. Then we decided to be going on night operation to witness what those women had been telling us. If you remember before, the whole area...
Were they a big source of infection, cross-infection for spread of the disease at the time?
At the time, our focus was not even HIV. At the time, it was the gender-based violence these women were going through. They would be picked by these men, and one woman is 10 men waiting to have sex with that woman. And they pay them whatever it was worthy. And a lot of them now had fistulas. And a lot of them had skin problems. You could see they were sick. If you remember before, the whole Addis Ababa Drive used to have girls parading. Yes. So we started getting them at night and enticing them to look at alternative life.
Because sex work and prostitution remains illegal in this country, but it takes place.
It does take place, yes. And even sometimes when they get rounded up, they are even abused wherever they are kept. In the police stations. So anyway, we mobilized and we put up this organization called Tasinta. The Finnish government funded us the first monies.
Why the name Tasinta?
Tasinta means, in Chichewa, means we have changed. Tasinta, Taleka, we have stopped. And we thought that was a telling name than another name. So we then called it Tasinta. In fact, we say Tasinta like you're speaking English, but the actual name is Tasinta. We have stopped. So anyway, we got our first monies. We got also money from the American embassy, and so on and so on. And we started the program by renting some space at YWCA And then when we got well funded by HIVOS and the Norwegian government, we then bought the property that is on Malambo Road, which used to be steel built before. And the reason we did that is because we now started meeting people saying, we can't give you money because you are infringing on the women's right. Sex work is work. We said, no, our experience, it's not sex work. And I'll tell you one story, that when this story was told by one of the girls who is alive and one of the ones we've reformed, I believed that we cannot do it another way. This girl told us a story that one day she was picked up with some friends, and they were taken to a house in Makeni. And when they arrived there, these men were they'll lie these girls on the floor, then they'll bring a rod and start pushing it in their vagina. The girl would scream until some of them even died. So she then, because they undressed them and they put a towel around them, so she started she says, I'm also going to be the next one to die. And there was a door that was ajar. Then she went backwards and opened a door, and she found a girl there who said, just run away because you are going to die. Even me, I'm just waiting for my death. I'm finished. This girl ran out. And then she started running and found a woman. As you enter shawarma, she was, but by then now they've realized she was not there, so the dogs were following her. So this woman, so she just pushed her in with the mbabula, closed the door. By then she was naked. I said, but where was your towel? She said, even running with a towel, the towel was feeling heavy. That's how this woman was saved. The following day, this old woman gave her a chitenge. She came to Tasina and said she will never go back to the street. And she became one of our very important resource when we are converting the other girls, because she would tell this story.
Did you try to help bring these men that abuse these women to justice? Because horror stories like that.
The unfortunate thing is, in Bemba we say Mpupun Pakuboko. So if this is a story they are telling you, but the people will just deny it.
To bring it to prosecution,
yes,
require more evidence than
yes,
that.
Yes. So we decided to focus on transforming the girls than even dealing
What skills were you giving them so that they don't go back to prostitution? Because sometimes prostitution, despite the risks, could be more profitable than what you were giving them. So how did you train them that they really tasinta?
With the training we gave them was basically their choice. And we had various categories. We had girls who had finished O levels. Those wanted to go back to school or even join university if they had good grades. And we respected that and paid. Others wanted to do computers. So we got them into some colleges where they could do computers. And I know one who even went and set up her own IT, what do you call them, computer lab, what do you call them, where people go to use the internet and things like that on the Copper Belt. And interestingly, a lot of girls want to be
internet cafes.
Internet cafe, yeah. And interestingly, a lot of them want to be mechanics. So we would go and attach them to some of the companies, and they learn mechanics and start working in those companies. We had some who wanted to be doing kindergarten teaching. So, and we even know one who went and set up their own school. And her reasoning was because these girls, they also do fall pregnant. And sometimes when you hear a child has been left in a trench,
Dumped.
those are mostly, so she got her heart to help little children, because she says this could be placenta children and they need help.
Okay, so let's jump to the.
So that's
let's jump to the politics.
Yeah.
I think you've achieved all you could. You are now a professor. And in 1996, we see you as a member of parliament for Mandevi. You are successful, and you immediately become a minister. Let's take that journey from there.
Yeah. If you remember, when I was first appointed, I was not a full cabinet minister. I was a deputy minister. And I was working with Katele Kalumba.
You were appointed as deputy minister at Ministry of Health.
Yes, at Ministry of Health. So I then said to Katele, I said, Katele, you and I have worked at UTH together. And you know me, I run.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sit as a deputy minister reading newspapers. I want you to give me something that I'll be responsible for, and I'll report to you what I'm doing. So he looked at me and says, well, you are an HIV epidemic expert, so I'm giving you all the epidemics to look after. So I said, thank you. So, of course, I started running with HIV because it was already a known epidemic. And one day, I'm going to work, and Katele comes into my office and says, hey, my epidemic minister, do you know we have a very serious epidemic? And I don't know how you're going to handle it, but it's serious.
Yeah.
And as a microbiologist, you know how serious it is. So I said, what is that? He says, we have a bubonic plague in Mumbwa. I said, a bubonic plague in Zambia? Then people will be wiped out. How did it come here? So he says, well, you wanted me. Expert. You wanted me to give you something to do. On the table is bubonic plague. So I sat. I called Dr. Chimba, may he rest in peace. I said, you are doctor. You are our public health expert here. Did the minister tell you that we have a bubonic plague? He says, no. I said, now I'm telling you. And probably didn't tell you because he wanted you to hear from me, because I'm the one responsible. And I said, I'm giving you, because by then I'd thought through it, I said, I'm giving you 1 hour. I want you to go to University of Zambia, find me a historian or two, find me parasitologists, find me vet scientists, then go to UTH, find me a microbiologist, and you as a public health expert, we need a meeting here.
Yeah.
And I'm giving you 1 hour. So if you can't get their phone, within 2 hours, I had these people in my office. And I said, you know what? Bubonic plague is associated with the animals. So you, the vet, this will be your job.
Yeah.
How we stop the transmission from the rats into human beings. Because already we have lost people. Now,
why Mumbwa? Why this bubonic plague, for rats, and people in Mumbwa don't even eat rats?
This is why I needed a historian.
Yeah.
Because the historian was going to tell us what has happened in Mumbwa in the past that could give us this epidemic.
Okay.
And how the people there lived. And remember, there's also the Kafue plains there. What has been happening there? And then the public health experts. Then the microbiologists to start now culturing the specimens from the people that were showing symptoms of bubonic plague. And we confirmed it was Yersinia pestis. Indeed, then we have this plague. The historian told us the history of what has happened in Mumbwa and where these rats could have come from. The vets were also busy, also culturing even, and also they know how to get rid of what chemicals they can use to start getting rid of the rats.
Yeah.
Now, when it was announced to the world that Zambia has bubonic plague, everybody, WHO, thought this is the end of people in Zambia. Because
it's a very deadly disease.
It's deadly. And believe it or not, this is documented. It's not a story I'm telling.
Yes.
Within 1 week, we eradicated the bubonic plague. By that time, WHO was getting people ready to come. When they landed at the airport, we were reporting to them that there's no... The Medicines Sans Frontier team said it can't be. We said jump into the car and go to Mumbwa. You will not find a single person infected, and you won't find any rats.
What do you
anywhere.
attribute that success to?
The teamwork.
And the multi-sectoral approach.
Multi-sectoral approach. And also looking for experts who we never think about. For example, social scientists, anthropologists,
And historians.
And incidentally, we had anthropologists on the team, social scientists on the team, so that they go and study the pattern of behavior for the people there. And that is one of the tragedies of Africa and the tragedies of politics, where people think because I've won an election, I'm the one. I am
the expert.
Yes. It's very, very important. And again, this talks to our investment in education. Investment in education and having the right experts. And at that time, we had them all. And we all came together. I provided the leadership, and we worked together as equals.
Yeah.
Each one respected each one's
contribution. And work. Yeah.
And when we reported as a team. So that's what I can contribute. And in fact, that lesson I learned, when now I became cabinet minister, we had a cholera epidemic.
Yeah, yeah. Because cholera is a political disease.
Yeah.
Remember, even the MMD in 1991 won because there was a cholera outbreak in Lusaka.
Yes.
So it's a political disease. It puts government very, very badly.
Yeah. But we were able to stop the cholera epidemic in 2 weeks. Because I used the same approach. And I even said, me as Minister of Health, I cannot lead the team fighting cholera. We had to make sure that we evoke the statutory instrument and gave the Minister of Local Government, because cholera is not a Minister of Health problem. It is to do with sanitation. And the people responsible for sanitation is local government. And in this case, with this government, it would be the Minister of Water and Sanitation. The second thing, it's about water. If water is contaminated, then you have this problem.
Yeah.
The third problem is people's behavior. And again, this whole vending and so on falls under local government. When they get sick, then it becomes Ministry of Health problem if you want to concentrate on drugs. But you can also have your public health team work with the people responsible for water and sanitation. And what is also important with cholera is the fact that the people that are vending in the street need data to convince them that indeed the transmission is taking place
where they are.
So what we did, we quickly did a study, and we did a mapping as well. And so we knew where were the teething points. So we quickly did a study, and we went and swabbed people on the street and the food. And we were able to show that the food that is being sold from dry hands, and because people, there are no toilets on the street, so they wouldn't have washed their hands, and the transmission. So when we were showing them this data, they believed. We also went compound by compound with a product that is called EnviroPure. Now there are even more products of that nature. We started throwing this powder in the toilets, and it was biodegrading in the pit latrines. And we made sure that everybody hooked, just cutting a tin, hooked it with a string into the roof. They were able to cover the toilets so that we don't have those green flies all over the place spreading the infection. And then we started, this chlorine project started during my time, so that we then distributed to every household chlorine so that the water they were drinking was safe. Now, what was the importance of, I'm talking about teamwork, of having a historian? The historian was able to describe that Lusaka, in the past, the whole Cairo Road into Mandevu, Kanyama, whatever, was a canal. And that's why if you look at the planning of Lusaka, most of the houses were in woodlands and Kablonga area and then Matero because of the canal. Then people came and built. Then it dried up. But you see, to dry up water and start misbehaving, you have to have the technology like the Chinese and everybody has. So if you go and dig a borehole in Mandevu, in Garden Compound, in Chawama, in Mississippi, and you have a pit latrine, because the water table is high, because this is a canal you're sitting on, then this water from the toilet, pit latrine, and the borehole, they start mixing. That's why groundwater in Lusaka is contaminated. And Lusaka Water and Sewerage know that. And this is why in Zambia we have epidemics within epidemics. We have dysentery epidemic, typhoid epidemic,
then cholera.
And now cholera. So this is a problem that the people that are governing this country need to sit back and use intellectual approach. Because you can reduce the number as much as you want. Because it's hot now, we don't have a lot of rain. We have to have a permanent solution. And if you recall, from the time I was Minister of Health, we had no cholera until maybe at the time, I think Dr. Chilufya was Minister. And even him, he took a totally different approach to it and made sure that we cleaned and made sure that the toilets, they were disinfected, and that's how the army came through and so on, and within a short period the cholera had gone. Because we cannot afford people to be dying. And yet the people, Dr. Kawimbe is alive. He was Minister of Health, and during his time he had cholera. I was Minister of Health.
Dr.
Chichilufi.
No, we have various expertise.
So we need to stop this thing in this country and Africa as a whole, where people who have sat in offices become your enemies. It's not right. I mean, talking about myself, Sylvia, myself, and I know each other from Yonks. She could just pick up a phone call and say, Prof, I have this problem. Yeah. And where health is concerned, we are trained never to say no, because you are trained to save lives. So I'm sure if Dr. Chilufya had been called upon, he would have obliged. Dr. Kawimbe would have obliged. So we just need to be different.
No, the lives in the last cholera were very, the numbers were very big. You've served Dr. Chiluba as minister. I think there's a break under President Mwanawasa.
Yes.
And then
I was amongst the third termers.
Yes.
We are the famous 22 who were fired for not supporting the third term.
Why didn't you support him?
Because it's a principle. We came under MMD on a platform of 2-term officers, and there was no way. Me, I'm a political technocrat.